Okay, guys. First part, make sure that you've watched this Khan Academy video lecture on imperialism and like how it all works. He goes through and does a really good breakdown of like the step-by-step causes, especially when you get to the part of the video where he's drawing on this part, writing on this part of the screen, and kind of showing like this thing leads to this thing, leads to this thing, leads to this thing. So just make sure you've watched that in preparation for the quiz. Okay. Um, but let's talk about the 5 reasons, 4 on this page, 1 on this page. So the first one being the Industrial Revolution and the birth of capitalism. So the Industrial Revolution is all about mass producing goods, taking raw materials, turning them into finished products, selling them at a very low price, but making a huge profit because you're able to sell so much of the material and produce it so cheaply. Now, you need a lot of raw materials to produce that. And these European countries like England or Belgium or Germany, they're kind of small. They don't have all of the natural resources of the world. And for the most part, the European countries are also pretty similar in terms of what resources they have. They're all, they have a very similar climate to us here in the American Midwest. So you can't grow like tropical fruit in most of Europe. So if they want to get the other types of materials that are, all around this planet, they need to go and get those things. So the Industrial Revolution gives countries a reason to want to get out there and find raw materials. And then once they start doing that, they also have a second reason that's kind of created by this, is they realize that the materials that they're producing, they don't just need to sell it to their own people. They can start selling it to other markets, the places that they conquer. That's why a lot of places, we haven't talked about this yet, but a lot of European countries really wanted to imperialize or colonize China. China is the most populous country in the world today. It's got like 1.4 billion people. Back then, it didn't have 1.4 billion people, but it still had hundreds of millions of people. And if you could control China and control trade with China, that means you could sell stuff to China. And that's a lot of people to sell stuff to. So industrialization and capitalism very intertwined into imperialism, into, more powerful countries using their power and their technology to dominate other countries. Reason number 2, pretty straightforward, nationalism. If you have the power and you feel pride in your country and you feel like your country is the best, obviously you want to use that power to make your country better. Okay, if you really believe that your country is better than all the rest, then prove it. Okay, so nationalism became another motivating factor to go out there and kind of compete with the other best countries of the world to try to take over all the little guys that you could. Okay, I'm going to skip number 3 for now. Let's go to number 4 because it's, again, straightforward. Number 4 is Christianity. The European countries that were doing this were all Christian. And so it's a secondary reason, but it's still important to a lot of these European leaders, was to go and Christianize the rest of the world. A lot of the rest of the world was not Christian, and so they could kind of get the church on board, and the church has a lot of money that could help buy ships and food and supplies for these imperialism voyages. So they would kind of team up with the church to go conquer other places, but also to do missionary work and kind of force the religion on those other places as well. Okay, we're going to skip number 3 until the very end. Let's go to number 5. The other thing that these countries had was, with the Industrial Revolution, these new technologies, which you just finished doing a little project on studying and researching. So these new technologies obviously gave them an advantage over places that didn't have these technologies. So Europe, because it was the center of the Industrial Revolution, was able to, and from a very early time frame, was able to use these technologies to leap ahead of the other places in the world. If you go back to like the Middle Ages, like the 1000s, the 900s, the 1100s, whatever you want to go, in that time period, back when we were talking about the Crusades, Europe was probably less advanced than the Middle East. Europe was maybe equal to a lot of Northern Africa, and probably way less advanced than China. So Europe during this time period kind of hit its stride. It was lucky in some ways, which we'll talk about here in a second, that they were able to do the Industrial Revolution before a lot of the rest of the world for a lot of different reasons. It's very complicated. And then they were able to use that advantage to dominate the countries that didn't do the Industrial Revolution before them. Okay, so these inventions and these three in particular really helped. Steam ships, so the steam engine, obviously, being able to power these ships to be able to trade and transport soldiers all around the world. Quinine. Quinine is a herb. It's a drug. It's used to combat the disease called malaria, or not the, I guess malaria would be the virus. Quinine it helped the Europeans who were from the northern cold regions go into the tropical regions of Africa, India, southern China, these islands in Indonesia, the Philippines, tropical places that had mosquitoes that carried malaria, which you can see up here, malaria. Quinine was an antiviral treatment. Okay, so it would kill the virus, which is why, if you guys have been paying attention to the news about coronavirus at all, some people are also saying that quinine-based drugs might help with coronavirus, although that has not been proven, and there's actually some studies that are coming out with evidence that it doesn't help, at least not the types that we have. Anyway, that's a tangent. The final one is the machine gun. We've talked about the other types of gun. I don't know, have we actually? I think we have. We've talked about how there's other types of guns. The first guns were very slow to fire, single bullets, takes a long time to reload. Those guns don't have a huge advantage. I mean, they have an advantage, but not a huge advantage over, hand-to-hand combat with swords and shields and stuff. It's not until the machine gun comes around that small groups of just a couple hundred European soldiers can go up against thousands of African or Native American or Chinese soldiers and mow them down. Okay, so the machine gun really expands Europe's capability to expand their territory. Okay, so those three things are important. Now let's go back to reason number 3, social Darwinism. This is a very disproven theory that was based loosely on the theory of evolution, came up by Charles Darwin. So it's the idea that through natural selection, some societies, some countries have obviously won the fight of evolution. They've, for whatever reason, made better choices, and they have evolved to a higher status. Okay, a lot of this was based on skin color, was based on race, and the social Darwinist scientists, and I'm doing air quotes right now, you can't see that, they're not scientists, they were wrong. They classified people into races and said that certain racial groups were inferior and certain racial groups were superior. Okay, superior groups were often the white groups that these social Darwinist people belonged to. Most social Darwinists were white, and they would put the darker skinned people in the lower groups. So this is another justification and reason for imperialism, saying, these white European countries, we are better than the non-white countries of the world, and they would go out and take them over. Now, if you want, this is obviously wrong, and there's a lot of reasons why. I will say one thing about it. I can understand why the people at the time thought this. When they looked around at their world, all of the white countries, or most of the white countries, were the powerful ones, and the countries that they were able to defeat were the non-white countries. So I get why they had this idea, but they were just totally wrong in why that was. The real reason behind this, and you'll get more of this if you take my geography class as seniors, has a lot more to do with geography. White people tended to be in an area, Europe, that had the perfect geography to develop advanced societies. Okay, so if we would have redone the map, if you could play God and put the different colored people in different places on the world, put the white people in Australia and the black people in North America and the Asian people in Europe, whoever ends up in Europe is going to have the benefits. Okay, they're going to win the game. if you can think of history as a game. There's a lot of reasons that go into that, and I know I'm not probably explaining it very well. But I just want to say that social Darwinism is wrong. It doesn't have to do with race. It has a lot more to do with the environment and the geography of these societies. Again, take my world geography class. We really talk about why some countries are rich and why some countries are poor. I think it would be very interesting. So the last thing I'll say before we leave on this is the Industrial Revolution and nationalism combined together. These reason number one, reason number two are really the primary reasons that kind of give birth to imperialism. Okay, having the technology, having this power of the economy combined with the idea that you are better than everybody else is why imperialism is going to happen. Okay, make sure you take the quiz today. Bye.